Well, I've always been interested in real-time performance. So I've been less interested in creating works that existed on tape or in some kind of recording, and more interested in creating pieces that could be performed live. The difficulty, again, in those days was doing live performances often involved huge amounts of equipment. So a colleague of mine in the early 80s, or maybe it was the late 70s, I don't remember what, we did a number of performances at galleries here in the city. And I mean, literally, it took hours and hours to set up and enormous amounts of equipment. And there was nothing that was particularly designed for live performance. Doing live performances with those ancient analog synthesizers was a very, very iffy proposition. Doing any kind of live signal processing was a very iffy proposition. I mean, and remains so for a very long time. Now, it still is a little tricky. I do a lot of it, and it still requires that you pay attention to all kinds of issues that you don't have to worry about when you're working on tape or in a studio. But that's the thing that's always interested me, because, of course, I think of these things as musical instruments. And so, of course, a musical instrument is meant to be performed live in front of people. It doesn't exist just in the studio. And so that would have been the thread that I would have liked to see developed. And it's true that it eventually did develop quite a bit. It is much easier to do it now than it was, let's say, in 1985. I did a gig in 1987 with the Santa Fe Opera, where I did a lot of real-time processing of people singing and orchestras, and it was risky, extremely risky. You had wireless mics on people hanging around their necks. You had vocoders and different time delay devices. You were doing this in real time. There was a potential of feedback. I mean, it was on the edge of audio disaster at any given moment, and we managed to pull off 4 performances in front of, well, I don't know, there must have been 1,200 people at performance. So, you know, it was nerve-wracking, but it was exciting at the same time, because you had to have an equal amount of knowledge about audio as you did about making music with electronic instruments, and fortunately, my background was such that I had that.
So this is, okay, this kind of goes into you being like a consultant for different audio setups at different places. I'm interested, what was the opera, just out of curiosity?
It was an opera called The Tempest by a composer named John Eaton. Oh. And I designed all the electronic music and the sound system and all that stuff.
I don't know how much you can necessarily go into detail, but like, what was the setup like? It was in,
it was wild. The Santa Fe Opera is an outdoor theater, very large outdoor theater.
There's that.
Yeah, there was that, yeah. So we had, what did we have? We had a 64-channel console with inputs coming from wireless mics hanging around singers. The orchestra was mic'd. We had offstage ensembles. There was a jazz band. There was a Renaissance ensemble. We had live keyboard players playing synthesizers. And then we had all the pre-recorded electronic music and the processors. Then we had a huge comm system, because, of course, everybody had to hear everybody, and we had a video link with the conductor and the assistant conductor so that the visual cues could take place. There were something like 300 cues for sound. So there was a 64 by 64 matrix monitor mixer that took care of just the communications channel, just so everybody could hear each other and talk to each other. Then there was, let's see, what did we have? We had we had something on the order of 6 DX7s in the pit with the orchestra, and I was controlling 32 DX7s with a Macintosh computer.
What year was this?
This is 1987.
Oh, okay.
And a sequencing program of my own design, and assorted. There was a my big Surge analog synthesizer was there, making thunder and seashores and whatnot. And we had 2 Bode vocoders that I was controlling with the Macintosh and in real time, and a couple of Eventide harmonizers, and I don't know. So a lot of stuff.
So how many singers were there, by the way, that were being manipulated?
Yeah, there were only like 4 being manipulated in real time, not at the same time, and different. There were like 4 characters being manipulated in real time, but that was enough. So you know, this is from Shakespeare's The Tempest. So Prospero was there, and Ariel was there, and who else? Oh, I don't remember. It's a long time ago. But there were 4 singers, and all kinds of strange things happened because, of course, the Santa Fe Opera Company was not used to working with audio electronics. I mean, there wasn't a single performance where there wasn't some disaster. I mean, I had one performance where a costumer put a pin through a wireless mic, and so the singer came up and there was nothing there. I had another performance where some carpenter needed an electrical cord for a saw at the last minute, so we pulled the power to all the powered speakers in the set. I had a multi-channel sound system set up in the set, so we turned on things and there was nothing there. I had stagehands disconnect all the mics in the orchestra pit because they had to move the conductor's podium, make him higher, and they didn't connect anything back together. So I used to roam around backstage at the opera at the beginning of the acts and at the beginning to make sure that things weren't being disconnected and whatnot. And my assistant started, he did all the cues at the beginning until I could get back there and do the mixing. But at the beginning of the opera and at each interact, I would snoop around backstage, just kind of making sure that people weren't disconnecting or unplugging various audio systems.
So people weren't really used to the idea of
no, they had no idea. They were no, and I mean we had to strike the council. It was this big Yamaha PM3000, which weighs about 600 pounds, that they used to have to bring in for every performance because the director wouldn't have it there during the performances of the other operas. So everything had to be struck and then it's set up for each performance.
If you were to try to do something similar now,
there isn't enough money on the planet to pay me to do something similar now. That was it for that. That was my one.
Like, what would you use now? And you'd be like, nothing.
Well, obviously things would be much easier if you were to do it now. But the problem with things becoming easier is that people want to do more. So, for instance, I made it very, very clear to the composer and to the producer of this that the wireless mics were not for sound reinforcement. They were for processing, and that the system I had designed was not intended for the high-pressure sound levels you require when you do sound reinforcement. It was designed to playback processing. Well, one day somebody discovered that if you turn this fader up, you could make this singer louder, because this singer couldn't balance with the orchestra and the conductor couldn't keep the orchestra down. Well, the next thing I knew it, they were doing sound reinforcement with all the wireless mics, and you know, it was just distorting because this poor system was not intended for this. And then, of course, I got criticized because it didn't sound good, and I said, but they didn't design it this way.